Undercover boss orders toast freezes when waitress breaks down. Under the pale morning light streaming through the frosted glass of morning grace, the first rays of sunlight touched the dark oak tabletop. Mornings in the city always carry something halfway between urgency and stillness, and inside that cafe every movement was as gentle as the clink of a spoon against a cup. Michael Foster sat alone in the farthest corner near the window like any regular customer. He wore a thick gray jacket, a low-brimmed cap holding a cup of hot coffee and a small notebook. Every few minutes he scribbled something down, but his eyes were quietly observing. Today wasn't a day for visiting the office. Today was the day he walked into the world his own system created to see how it truly operated. A group of students had just left, leaving behind a table full of pastry wrappers and 3 empty paper cups. A young waitress approached.
She was thin-shouldered, slightly slumped beneath a worn apron.
Her table-clearing movements were fast and precise, as if she had done it 1,000 times. After wiping the table, she walked over to the counter and poured warm water for the next table, an elderly couple who had just sat down. "Thank you, sweetie," the woman smiled. The waitress smiled back and nodded. But as she turned away, she leaned in toward a coworker and whispered just loud enough for only someone nearby to hear, "I can't wash any more dishes, my hands are all blistered." Michael heard it. The sentence passed through him like a sudden cold breeze down his spine. He set his cup down, eyes fixed on the girl. She didn't know she was being watched. She carried on as if nothing had happened, walked over to the espresso machine, pressed the button, turned the steam wand, then returned to the counter. But Michael saw clearly her movements weren't as fluid anymore. Her left hand clenched the apron strap slightly while her right hand trembled as she carried a cup to the tray. Her heel wobbled a little, and at one point, she nearly tripped over a chair leg but didn't react. She simply paused half a second, then continued. He glanced down at his notebook. The last unfinished line read, "Customer arrived at 7:41. Barista's expression changed when she saw Lisa." Michael crossed out that line, then wrote a new one, brown-haired girl, trembling hand. Talks about blisters. Hiding the pain. A few more customers entered, sending a small ripple through the cafe. Staff greeted them with well-timed smiles, but Michael didn't smile. Something inside him had just shifted. Not because of a complaint. Not because of system data, but because of one sentence too soft, too faint, yet strong enough to hint at something much bigger. A system might be running according to reports, but is it truly taking care of the silent people who helped build it? The girl returned to the counter, placed the tray down, bent over to open a drawer, and suddenly exhaled sharply as if in pain. Her hand pressed briefly against the counter, then quickly slipped into her apron pocket. A small movement, nearly instinctive, but to Michael, it was a signal. Another staff member walked by. She immediately stood upright again and nodded as usual. Michael looked down at his coffee, still more than half full. He didn't drink it. He just kept his hands wrapped around the cup, using the remaining warmth to stay grounded. That familiar feeling of crisis management returned. He knew if you look only with your eyes, you won't see anything. But if you look with concern, every tiny detail starts to matter. The cafe continued running. Customers were still cheerful. But in every carafe of coffee being poured by the hour, how much sweat and hidden pain was mixed, and a customer nearby laughed loudly, pulling Michael back to the present. He nodded politely, then wrote another line. She didn't complain.
She didn't ask for help.
But she is in pain. And my system let this happen? Right then, something small, yet unusual occurred. The waitress poured water for a male customer. As she bent to grab another cup, her sleeve lifted slightly, revealing a red patch of skin. A burn. An old one. Not recent, but clearly never properly treated. The customer didn't notice. But Michael did. She quickly pulled her sleeve down and stepped behind the espresso machine.
Stood still for a moment as if waiting for the pain to subside.
Then came back out as if nothing had happened. Michael opened his phone and made a note using her internal employee code. There was no more doubt. This wasn't just fatigue. This was a warning sign. And he knew if he didn't act now, then who just a few minutes later Michael left his seat. Not to go home, but to move closer to the espresso bar. From there, he could clearly watch every expression, every movement, every silence between greetings. And from there, he began a new journey not just to drink a morning coffee, but to uncover what was really happening behind that cup. At the corner of 4th and Elm, mornings on Wednesdays were always busy, especially close to 8 a.m. Some were heading to work, some to class. Some just looking for a strong enough coffee to fight off the sleepiness from a sleepless night. Tucked between glass towers, the Morning Grace Calf branch number 8 of the new Dawn Calf chain looked more like a resting stop than a place where something serious might unfold. But for Michael Foster, the name Morning Grace felt very different today. Outside, the faded white-painted wooden sign creaked softly. Inside the calf had a minimalist design, gray brick walls, light wooden floors, and vintage-style tables and chairs. Soft golden light from hanging bulbs filtered through sheer curtains, reflecting off the steam rising from the espresso machine. The smell of baked pastries blended with quiet conversations and the hum of the milk frother, forming a wordless soundtrack, warm and familiar. Michael sat by the window. From this spot, he could observe the entire service area from the coffee bar to the semi-open kitchen in the back. He looked like a middle-aged man with time to kill. No one would have guessed that he was the founder of the very calf chain they worked in. A soft ding echoed as the door opened. Megan stepped out from behind the bar carrying a tray toward a new table. She wore a dark brown uniform, the collar of her white shirt slightly creased. Her figure was slender, her steps tilted slightly forward as if compensating for long-term fatigue. Despite the dark circles under her eyes, she still wore a faint default smile. "Good morning. What can I get started for you?" Her voice was gentle, polite. But Michael noticed as the guests browsed the menu, she subtly rotated her left wrist as if soothing a pain. He flipped open his notebook, scribbled a line, then kept watching. Lisa, the morning shift lead, stood behind the bar. Her eyes darted from the POS screen to the staff, then to customers. No one made unnecessary movements when Lisa was nearby. She didn't smile, didn't greet customers. Yet everyone seemed cautious. "Table 3 wants to change their order," a junior staff member spoke up. Lisa didn't look up. "No changes. It's already printed. Next time, ask carefully." Just 3 sentences. But they made the entire atmosphere pause for a beat. Michael continued taking notes. Lisa, directly in charge of barista operations, shift scheduling, tip distribution. She held power over everything in the morning shift. Jake, the assistant cook, was slicing pastries in the back. He wore a full apron and a hairnet. When Megan entered to hand over the order, Jake gave a simple nod. But as soon as she turned away, he leaned past the divider and pulled a small ice pack from a drawer, wrapped it in a kitchen towel. He looked around, then quietly placed it near the dishwashing station. Michael saw everything. Added a third line to his notes. Jake, helping to cover something up near the door, sat Mr. Peter, the only one who seemed untouched by the tense atmosphere. He looked to be almost 70, wore a flannel shirt, and always brought a newspaper. He sat at the same table at the same hour, always ordering 1 sugar-free cappuccino. Today, he leaned slightly toward Michael, lowering his voice like sharing a secret. "You see that girl there? It's a miracle she's still here." Michael nodded gently. Didn't respond, but his mind was already piecing things together. The first suspicious detail happened at 8:27. A man placed a $5 bill in Megan's palm, whispering, "This is just for you." Megan nodded, offered a soft smile. But as she turned away, Lisa, standing close, extended her hand. "I'll put it in the shared tip jar." Without waiting for an answer, Lisa took the bill and dropped it into the glass jar at the center counter. Megan didn't say a word, but her eyes dropped noticeably. The second detail came just 10 minutes later. After the morning rush, Megan stepped behind the bar to retrieve her notepad. Michael noticed she subtly opened the pocket inside her apron, pulled out a wad of small bills, counted them quickly, then tucked them away just as fast. The movement was clearly meant to go unnoticed. But Michael had seen it. Moments later, while washing trays at the stainless steel sink, her right hand trembled slightly. Turning her back to the others, she reached into her apron, pulled out a small plastic pill bottle, no label. No safety cap. 2 round white pills, swallowed in a single breath. No water. No pause. Just 1 second, but Michael's inner world turned upside down. He tightened his grip around his now cold coffee cup. On past trips and meetings with branch managers, he often heard the same phrase, "Everything's fine." The calf runs by the book. But no one mentioned pills swallowed in secret. No one brought up blistered hands. No one ever reported tips being taken in front of customers. And then a small twist, Mr. Peter, after his first sip of cappuccino, waved Megan over. "Once I'm gone later, do you have a ride home?" Megan smiled, shook her head. "No, sir. But I'm used to walking." Peter tilted his head. "Every morning I see you coming from the lot under the bridge. It's freezing there. You sleep there, don't you?" That question, even though it was just an expression of care, made Megan pause slightly. But she quickly nodded and walked away without answering. After just 3 steps, she nearly dropped the tray of stainless steel spoons. Michael no longer looked at his notebook. He just stared at the space where Megan had stood. At this moment, he was no longer a CEO in disguise. He was a man asking himself, can a successful coffee chain truly be called successful if the person brewing the coffee can't even get a proper night's sleep by around 10 a.m.? The flow of customers into morning grace had begun to slow. The tables near the window still had faint steam clinging to the glass from hot cups of tea. Michael tapped the order button on his phone, choosing an extra serving of buttered toast and ginger tea. He intentionally ordered through the internal app to observe how staff reacted when an order came from a silent customer who never stood up to ask. Within 3 minutes, Megan stepped out from the barista station holding a wooden tray with a steaming cup of tea and a slice of toasted bread. She still wore that faint smile as she placed the order in front of Michael, but for a brief moment her hand slipped slightly while rotating the tray. "Sorry, my arm's a bit tired." Michael nodded slightly. He didn't react. But as she turned to walk away, he clearly saw it, her steps were heavy. Not from fatigue alone, but from the effort of hiding that fatigue. A few minutes later, from his seat, Michael noticed Megan heading toward a small wooden chair behind the counter. It sat between the stockroom and the kitchen, a spot where only those truly exhausted would dare to sit mid-shift. Megan sank into the chair, both hands resting on her knees, her back slightly hunched. But instead of steady breaths to recover, she just sat there gasping. Each breath was an effort. A moment later, she leaned back, one hand covering her face just for a few seconds, then quickly dropped it as she heard approaching footsteps. A junior staff member named Kiera walked over and leaned down to whisper, "Skipped lunch break again." Megan simply shook her head, eyes fixed on the floor. "Just wish I could work one day without having to fight for every dollar of tips just to survive." Michael heard every word. He didn't need to observe any further, he had heard enough. That sentence wasn't just a tired complaint. It was a clear signal the system's operation had drifted far from the fairness he had once built it upon.
She wasn't bitter. She didn't speak with resentment.
She simply released a truth she had endured far too long, as light as a final breath after a shift without rest. Michael set down his cup of tea. He was no longer just a silent note-taker. In his mind, every benchmark, every operational standard, every internal metric suddenly meant nothing if one employee had to swallow pills without water, had to hide wounds on her hands, had to tremble while counting each tip just to survive. A soft chuckle rose from the far end. Mr. Peter was turning his newspaper as usual. He looked toward Michael, nodded, then leaned in to speak softly. "She's applied to be full-time before. Twice. But Lisa refused. Said she's not flexible enough." Michael turned fully toward him. "Not flexible," Peter nodded slowly. "She can't do the night shift because she works a second job at the gas station." He paused and sighed. "I told her, you don't have to work 3 jobs at once." She laughed and said, "I don't like it, but I have to." Michael sat in silence. His hand rested on the small notebook, not writing, just gripping it. At that exact moment, a voice rang out from behind the counter. Lisa was pointing at Megan. If you can't handle it, then quit. No one here's waiting on anyone. No one responded, but everyone heard. The entire caf went silent for a few seconds. The kitchen assistant quietly returned to the dish station. Jake paused mid-slice. Megan stood still, her eyes fixed on the door as if it were the only escape route. Michael turned back to the wall-mounted display showing live order updates. His order was still on screen table 14 toast plus ginger tea delivered, a system designed to run smoothly. But behind those order codes were human beings. And today he no longer saw just metrics. He saw calluses. He saw quiet eyes. An emotional drop spread through the space. Viewers, if they had been there, would have felt a tightness in their chest. They weren't just witnessing. They were walking this path with Michael. A CEO sitting in a small caf asking himself, how can someone do everything right and still not survive? Michael looked at his watch. 10:13 a.m. One more hour until the meeting with the regional operations team. But he knew today he wasn't going anywhere. Because the meeting he truly needed wasn't with the management team. It was with those being left behind by that very system. He looked over at Megan. She was back on her feet, wiping the counter with a cloth. Her face had returned to its usual calm expression. But anyone paying close attention would notice that smile was more tired than it had been an hour ago. Michael opened his phone and quickly flagged the branch. Under the line morning, Grace, he added a short note: morning shift, full audit needed. Urgent. Michael stood up from the table after nearly 2 hours of observation. His tea had gone cold, the toast only half eaten.
But he hadn't come here to eat.
He came to listen. He walked slowly toward the counter, stopping near the milk and sugar station, and nodded at a young male employee arranging a tray of pastries. Not to start a direct conversation, but like a regular customer who'd been here many times. How long have you been working here? He asked, his voice warm and steady. Almost 3 months now, the young man named Leo replied, a bit hesitant. Michael smiled gently. How's the morning shift busy? Leo glanced around, then wiped his hands with a towel. Yes, it's busy. But we've gotten used to it. Michael nodded, pausing for a beat. Have you ever asked for extra hours? Leo gave a weak smile. Yes, but Lisa said there's no spot for us. All the main shifts are already taken. Michael remembered every word. It sounded like a regular answer, but to the head of a system, it meant something else. If shifts were being held selectively, then opportunities were being unfairly divided too. He thanked Leo, then continued toward the mini-fridge where the pastries were displayed. Another female staff member, short-haired, was rearranging the trays. Michael asked, "Is this one blueberry flavor?" She nodded, then cautiously added, "You should get it in the early morning. By afternoon, it's usually gone." Michael smiled. Must be a busy place. The girl shrugged lightly. Busy is good if tips were shared evenly. He looked up, eyes tilting slightly. What do you mean? She hesitated, then quickly turned back toward the counter as if she had already said too much. Oh, nothing, sir. Michael didn't press. He knew that kind of deflection well, not because they didn't want to speak, but because they knew speaking up wouldn't change anything. Or worse, it might cost them their job. Moments later, the receipt printer beeped, signaling the end of an order round. Megan stepped out from the back, holding a temporary payroll slip, numbers printed on thin white paper reflecting the counter lights like sharp folded lines. Michael was standing nearby. He saw it clearly. Megan's steps slowed as she looked at the paper.
She said nothing, but her hand gripped the sheet tighter.
Just for a second, she froze. Then she placed her left hand on the edge of the counter as if to steady herself. Her right shoulder slumped slightly, her eyes fixed on a number on the slip. No one else noticed. The caf was humming with the steady sound of the coffee machine, the soft laughter from the last table, the light breeze slipping through the wooden door crack. But Michael saw. He didn't move. He didn't step in. He wanted to see what happened when no one came to rescue that moment. Megan slowly stepped behind the wooden partition separating the kitchen. No one followed. No one called her name. She crouched down back, leaning against the wall. In that instant, she disappeared from everyone's view except Michael's. He tilted his head and saw her arms wrapped around her knees, her face buried in the crook of her elbow, a curled-up posture as if to protect herself from a storm that no one else could see. About 30 seconds passed. She stood up, wiped her face quickly with the back of her hand, adjusted her apron, and walked out as if nothing had happened. But it wasn't that Michael didn't see, and the audience, if they followed this journey, couldn't look away either. This was no longer just about work. It had become a story of survival. Megan walked over to a new customer, smiling the exact standard service smile, her voice soft as usual. But her eyes were different. Something inside her had just been drained and there wasn't time to fill it back up. Michael returned to his seat. His hand touched the notebook and he wrote just 3 words fractured. In silence. Then he underlined them twice. By now, what he felt wasn't curiosity. It wasn't suspicion. It had become empathy. A tightening in the throat, that moment when you witness someone trying so hard not to collapse even though all it would take was a soft breeze to knock them down. The audience, if they were inside this caf, would no longer ask what's going on here. They would want one thing, only for anyone to do something. Right now, Michael closed the notebook, and in his heart, a decision began to form. Not from anger, but from something even stronger, a feeling that he could no longer stay silent. Megan bent down to wipe the last smear of butter from table 6. The cloth she used was old and frayed at the edges, its fabric faded gray from too many washes. Each motion of wiping came with a small strain in her shoulder, as if her arm had been worn out across too many shifts. Michael stood up. He didn't check his phone, didn't look at his watch, didn't need another piece of evidence. There was only one thing becoming crystal clear in his mind: this had gone too far. He walked slowly toward the counter, stopping right at the spot where earlier that morning Lisa had swatted the tip money out of Megan's hand. "Excuse me," he said, voice calm and even. "I have a few questions about how tips are divided and how shift schedules work here." A simple sentence. But in that moment, the whole room seemed to freeze. Lisa was adjusting the shift log. She looked up, frowning. "And you are Michael?" Didn't answer right away. His eyes were still on Megan, who was trying hard to act normal, even though her hand had just dropped a metal spoon on the floor. Just someone trying to understand why a full-time worker still can't make ends meet, and why she started crying just from reading her payslip. Lisa pressed the binder slightly tighter. Her eyes glanced around, then returned to Michael. "I don't understand what you're implying. Everything here runs according to company policy." Michael looked her directly in the eye. "Does it?" The silence stretched. The coffee grinder stopped. A customer near the counter lifted their cup more slowly than usual. In the back, Jake peeked his head out quietly. Michael turned toward the seated guests. He didn't need a microphone. He only needed a voice honest enough to make people want to listen. "I came here this morning as a customer. But in 2 hours, I saw a staff member work non-stop without a break. I saw her hide 2 pills inside her sleeve because she didn't want anyone to know she was in pain. I saw her tips taken right in front of her. And I saw her eyes sunken from exhaustion because she's juggling 3 jobs just to afford a place to sleep for the night." Michael turned back, his voice steady as ever. "And I have just one question," why Lisa exhaled, barely audible. "I think you're misunderstanding the situation," but Michael cut her off. Not with anger, but with a silence louder than any shout. From the inside pocket of his jacket, he pulled out a brown leather ID badge, simple, unassuming. Then he held it up at eye level. Michael Foster, founder of the New Dawn calf chain, and someone who once believed we could build a system where staff don't have to trade their health just to earn enough hours. That final sentence fell into the room like a hammer hitting stone. Lisa stepped back half a step. Her hand moved away from the notebook. No one in the calf spoke. Even the customers at that moment put down their cups and watched closely. Michael walked toward the POS machine, glancing at the screen list of orders, staff names, delivery times all displayed. But nothing showed a clear work schedule. No sign of Megan on the official shift list. He turned back and asked directly, "Is Megan on the official staff list?" Lisa hesitated. "She's just part-time. She gets her shifts weekly."
How long has that been? Lisa stayed silent.
Michael repeated, "How long has she been working here?" "Over 6 months. That answer was more than enough. Michael exhaled slowly. 6 months of continuous work without a formal contract. No benefits. No insurance. No voice. He looked out across the cafe, not to find someone, but to see everything. And today, when one of my employees collapsed behind the counter from exhaustion, no one asked why. No one stopped her from taking painkillers with dishwater. No one asked where she's sleeping at night. The silence stretched on. An undeniable kind of silence. Megan was still standing there. She didn't know what to do. Her eyes were fixed on the floor, her hand clenched tightly around her apron. But this time, she didn't bow her head. She didn't step back. She was waiting. Waiting to see if this time someone would stand with her. And Michael, for the first time that morning, smiled. Not because he was pleased, but because he knew he was about to do the right thing. Michael removed his cap and placed it on the counter. With his left hand, he slowly pulled from his wallet a familiar lanyard badge, black background, golden embossed letters, Michael Foster, founder and executive director. He didn't raise it. He simply placed it gently on the wooden counter beneath the soft yellow lights, and that was enough to draw every eye in the room. "I'm Michael Foster, founder of the new Dawn Calf chain." One sentence, not loud, not harsh, but like a current slicing through the tense air. Lisa stood still, lips pressed tightly. The other staff, the one squeezing oranges, the one wiping tables, even Megan, froze. No one moved. No one even breathed heavily. Everyone understood this moment could not be undone. It was no longer a customer complaint, no longer a minor morning incident. This was the moment the full truth had to step into the light. Michael didn't turn to Lisa. He looked straight toward the small monitor behind the counter where the internal security footage was displayed. "Pull up this morning's footage. Camera 3, cashier counter angle." Lisa didn't move. Michael's tone dropped, not louder but unquestionable. Right now, a barista quietly stepped forward and operated the system. The screen flickered a few times, then showed the cashier counter at 8:46 a.m. In the video, Lisa took cash from a customer, turned away, and placed the bill into the shared tip jar. But in the same frame, it was clear that the customer had just told Megan, "This is just for you." The action was fast, but undeniable. Michael asked them to switch to the camera in the staff break room. The screen changed to show the shift board hanging on the wall, a whiteboard with the names of 5 official staff members. Megan's name wasn't there. Michael turned around slowly. An employee works here for 6 months straight and isn't listed on the shift board. An employee receives a personal tip from a customer only to have it swept into a shared jar. Someone asks repeatedly to be made official and gets denied. Not because of incompetence, but because of a lack of favoritism. Lisa exhaled sharply, her voice starting to rise. "That's just how our branch operates." "We have a flexible system," Michael interrupted. "No. The rules come from me. And the principle is this: those who work earn. Those who try deserve." He paused, eyes sweeping the room sternly. Every corner, every employee, every customer was silent, listening. Rules are not made to conceal. They are made to protect. No one has the right to alter the system to turn effort into a personal privilege. Lisa lowered her head, but still protested, her voice softer. "I was just doing things the way we always have." Other branches also, which other branch? Michael stepped closer, not in threat, but like a challenge, inviting the truth to step out of the shadows. Lisa said nothing more. Michael turned to the barista from earlier. Call the regional HR now. I want to review all the shift schedules and tip distributions from the past 3 months at this location. Then he turned around and faced Megan. She was still standing there, her hands holding a tablecloth now soaked. In her eyes was something strange, not exactly surprise, not fear, but like someone who had stood too long in the rain and someone finally offered them an umbrella. Michael gave her a nod, subtle, meant only for her. You weren't wrong to feel tired. Your only mistake was thinking no one noticed. That sentence, like a thread, connected everyone's emotions in the caf. From the kitchen to the floor staff to the quiet customers in the back, they all felt it, something was shifting. And it wasn't just within the system, but right here in this place, in this moment. That very morning, Michael didn't leave the caf. He stayed not as a CEO, but as someone who wanted to witness with his own eyes every layer of injustice peeled away from a place he once believed in. Lisa, her face now confused her gestures, Shaky was asked to stop working and step away from the counter. A regional manager arrived from headquarters 45 minutes later, bringing with them the cross-check of working hours, shift logs, and the temporary staff roster. In less than an hour, all the data was verified. Megan had indeed worked for over 6 months, many days, covering double shifts, filling in when others were absent. Yet her name never appeared on any official contract. No insurance. No benefits. Not even a word of thanks. Michael didn't wait. Right then and there, he requested an official contract be signed for Megan with full back pay starting from her first full shift month. Tips that were withheld tracked via camera footage and confirmed by regular customers were also added to her payment. But he didn't stop there. A technician from HQ was brought in to install a real-time tip tracking system with a small screen mounted just behind the bar counter. Each order, each act of service would display clearly who handled it, how much tip was recorded, and instantly update into each staff member's personal account. No more shared tip jars. No more shift-based splits. No more only the manager's favorites get their share. Everything transparent, immediate, untouchable. Michael walked over to Megan, still standing behind the counter, unsure what to do with her hands. She wasn't used to someone standing up for her. He spoke gently, but with clarity. You don't have to walk home anymore. And from now on, no one in my system will have to live like they're struggling for every breath. Megan looked at him, eyes red, but for the first time there was light. Not from tears, but from something else like trust trying to come back to life after being forgotten for far too long. Right beside the coffee machine, a new message was printed and taped onto the wooden panel. Every smile and service deserves a life of dignity. No one in the caf said a word, but the silence now was no longer heavy. It was the quiet of an ordinary morning that had just witnessed something extraordinary. Not because someone got suspended, not because a contract was signed, but because for the first time an exhausted employee was recognized as a human being, not just a number on the shift schedule. Michael didn't make a speech. He didn't call for applause. He simply sat back at his old table where the cup of tea had gone cold and quietly looked around. Megan was now holding a staff meal voucher issued the moment she officially signed her contract. She sat at a corner table by the window, eating her egg sandwich and drinking a glass of orange juice, her first breakfast that she didn't have to pay for with sheer effort. Her hands were no longer trembling, her eyes no longer darting around, and her smile was no longer something forced to keep a job. It was a natural reflex. Gentle. Free. Whole. Michael saw it and nodded. As he stood up, Megan looked up and gave a small nod back. No words, but the connection was unmistakably clear. The story didn't end with a press conference. There were no applause or reform scoreboards. But every single person there that day, whether staff, customer, or someone who just happened to walk in, left the caf carrying something with them. A quiet belief that maybe, just maybe, justice still exists in places we think no one cares about. And for the viewers watching this entire journey unfold, they weren't just satisfied because the truth was exposed or because a CEO took action. They were satisfied because they saw themselves in it. In Megan's tired eyes. In the words, "Just wish one day I could work without fighting for every tip." In the slow but firm rise of fairness. And they left the video with a simple wish: if only someone like Michael Foster existed at their workplace too.